thing that's most in my heart and mind right now is the intersection between vulnerability and intimacy with ourselves and between two people. And you and I have talked off camera a ton about this, and self-expression. So what it means to be like vulnerable enough with ourselves to share who we really are with the world. Because I think that's really our fundamental purpose here, is to share who God made us to be and to share God through ourselves, which means most likely, at least in every scenario I've ever seen, going farther than is comfortable in self-expression. That track, that land?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thoughts?
I mean, I think my relationship to vulnerability, like in my own personal evolution, I think more about like transparency, intimacy, and how that one is fulfilling for our soul. That's our self-expression. It's like this just feels right. It's showing that it's meant to be. It gets to be that way. And I would say beyond that, it also unlocks more of our potential.
Yeah.
Because we become more transparent and more visible to those in our lives and to life itself. And we're more available. It's like we're able to be seen and felt more. So life, God, our family, our friends, strangers, life essentially can co-create with us more when life can actually know us.
Exactly. So when we take the risk, you could say, to be vulnerable and share, and it feels risky because we don't know how we're going to perceived. We're used to sharing, I would say, a pretty small spectrum of who we are with the world. The risk is when we expose that, when we share that, we have no idea how the world's going to respond. So the ego, which just wants to take care of us, it's like, hey man, maybe don't do that. But in the not sharing of that, I think we tend to look around at our relationships, at our results, at our finances, at our businesses, sort of scratching our heads being like, but why perhaps does it feel hard to create something new? And to me, the answer is always going to be found behind that door of vulnerability and intimacy because of what you just said. Because when we keep a part of ourselves hidden away, we're not giving God, our loved ones, our spouses, our kids, our friends, our clients, our prospects, the capacity to see that and respond. And it's almost like, I often think of it as like the world's like waiting for that door to open in our hearts and in our self-expression, so it can go, oh my God, there he is, and like run to us in all the forms it's waiting to, because it's certainly not as if God's withholding any good thing that we want.
Right. Yeah, when I think about it in terms of receiving our desires, receiving support, receiving of anything essential, important, or exciting to us at all, the actual receiving is a state of being, and when we're vulnerable, it's like we open up our receiving because people get our digits, because they can see. So like, for example, I could really be wanting a hug, and the first kind of visible way to see receiving is I'm willing to ask for it. So I say, I want a hug, or I would love help. So that to me is just only the first layer though. And there's all these other layers. It's like, okay, well, you can understand just through language, like, oh, you want a hug, got it. But I feel like the other layers of clarity are so important. I would distinguish it as like the heart of my desire and the spirit of my desire. The heart of my desire is the meaning that it actually has in my heart. And that's where, if you can feel what that means to me, then it literally creates like this magnetism, not necessarily for you to give me a hug, but I'm magnetic to receiving a hug. I'm just magnetic with life. It's like, because you can feel the desire versus just understanding it. And then there's the spirit of it, and I would only distinguish that to say like that's like the electrical current, that's the aliveness, that's the life-giving, like the enthusiasm, the inspiration in my desire. And I feel like when the heart is open and then the spirit is able to flow, then when we add then it's like people are like, oh, there you are. So then however they're supporting us, collaborating with us, co-creating with us, being the fulfillment of one of our desires, that circuit can complete itself.
Yeah, in what you just expressed, we immediately become visible on someone's radar. Oh, there you are.
Right.
And we tend to, I think, consciously or unconsciously walk around, even if we know better, we do tend to walk around being like, I'm doing everything I can to get that hug,
Right.
make that money, build that business, find a partner. And we tend to unconsciously, I think, go, yeah, but life's not reciprocating. And life's like, no, 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 no. I'm giving back to you at exactly the level you're showing up for me.
I think one of the places this gets super interesting is in relationship, when you are like, no, I literally verbally said I want support or I desire this, but if you, for example, are in your head and not your heart, then that heart energy is not actually transmitting and people can't feel you. So then that could be, and often is, the difference maker in someone actually hearing you. They could hear you verbally, but are they hearing you energetically? Are they hearing you emotionally? Are they in a way that moves them? A classic example would be like, I remember, and this happens to me sometimes, and I'm sure I've been on both sides of this equation. Someone will ask me for something and talk themselves out of it at the same time, and I can literally feel me as this potential of saying yes or no. I could feel my oscillation being created by them. Be like, hey, I could really use some, use an ear and use some support. I mean, if you have time, I know you're really busy. I know you just lost your house, but when you get, so it's like literally on the energetic plane, even in my unconscious, it's a mixed signal. And so that person's lighting up, or how they're lighting up, or how I'm being moved as the fulfillment of their desire is literally changing because of that mixed signal. The other part of the signal is saying, this is a bad idea. Whatever the subconscious content is, I'm not worth it, whatever it is, but it literally becomes a projection onto life. And it's just interesting when that happens in a relationship, because you could hypnotize yourself and convince yourself, be like if your coach said, well, just ask for it, and you're like, but I did. We've had like 100 conversations.
Yeah. And then the experience, right, as the asker, in that the experience is, I'm doing everything I can.
Right.
I literally asked and I didn't get the thing. So as the asker, you're still walking around unfulfilled. And to me, this is this very refined level of personal responsibility, because it is our job to ask for what we want. It is our job to, in a way, with our presence, demand that the world meet us, command that the world meets us. And I have had a similar experience on both ends of what you just described, both asking and being like, why am I not getting this? Like I'm saying the thing and I know the person loves me, and I've been in your shoes too, where I'm like, I hear the words you're saying, but the energy transmission is extremely unclear. It's oscillating, and it incapacitates me to actually give you the thing you want to a certain degree. So this is this very, to me, refined level of personal responsibility. It's beyond asking for what we want. That's a huge step, and I don't want to diminish its significance. And for a lot of people, just that is a massive step forward. It is. But it's also who we're being when we ask. Are we actually receptive? Do we believe we deserve it? Like in that example, oh, I know you're busy and you just lost your house. And it's like, well, sure, all that may or may not be true. Why don't you ask me in the spirit of truly receiving and believing you're worth it and believing I want to show up to meet your need?
Another way said is just be truthful. Because that's the simplicity of it, and that's where it becomes intimate, and that's where connection can happen, because it might appear to be, because it's coming from a positive intention to control someone else's reality, it's still actually coming from fear, right? And so if we're being really honest, I don't need to pre-qualify you or help you be a grown-ass man and just answer me whether or not you can help me with what fulfill my desire.
Yeah.
So all the extra sauce, like, I mean, if you can, I know you're busy. Like, the thing is, for me, this was my process, I guess, in discovering this, is like, first of all, to just be both compassionate for myself and honest with myself. Honesty would be like, okay, as a function, but why am I trying to help him
Show up for
decide
me.
if he's like, where's that actually coming from? The mind would be like, oh, well, no, 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 I know you're, but it's like, but that energy is coming from a disconnect, which then again changes the energy that's being transmitted.
For sure. And it's not actually the highest level of vulnerability,
Exactly.
transparency, or intimacy for me to show up and go, I have a need I would love to see if you can meet or support me with, but I'm scared that my ask is going to trigger you in a certain way, or that I'm asking to, whatever that thing is in the mind that pre-qualifies, that pre-negates.
Is not being vulnerable.
It's not. Because what's vulnerable is like, hey man, I could use some support. Are you available to give that? And allowing you, as you said, to be a grown-ass man and say yes or no without any responsibility here. But I was talking to a client about this who was talking to their spouse and had an emotional need that they wanted some support with, but felt so uncomfortable saying it for a variety of reasons and didn't. One of the things I was pointing out is like, when you don't ask for this, okay, you didn't, but when you don't, you're not only robbing yourself of an opportunity, you're actually robbing someone else of an opportunity to grow, to evolve, to show up, to love you, for them to grow in their capacity to love and to serve. And I think that's powerful, not so we feel guilty or wrong for doing it a certain way, but just so we can recognize in our fear to ask for what we want because we're afraid of how the other person may or may not respond, we're actually doing someone a disservice by not being vulnerable enough to ask and giving them the opportunity to grow and show up.
I agree 100%. And I think something important in the understanding of all this is like, one of the reasons that we fear to ask, or why it feels vulnerable, is because we essentially don't want to feel like we're losing love.
Exactly.
Right? Because that's really what rejection feels like, or what we perceive as rejection. If someone says no, it's like, I opened myself, I was vulnerable, I asked, and then someone said no. I think it's, I mean, going really to the depth of it, it's actually a projection of the mind, because love can't be lost. But I think the experience, or creating the experience, like, we have lost love, we're no longer worthy, that perception then creates this awful feeling, and then it may get linked to the asking, and it's like,
It
oh, so
does.
that doesn't feel good, so if I'm asking, I'm taking the risk of feeling
Yeah.
that deep lie, is what it is.
Full on, 1,000%. And the irony, but it's so much more tender than that. The pain of that is it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy because we don't ask because we're afraid to experience losing love. And in the not asking, we don't get that need met. We don't feel
Right.
seen or met. And we feel unloved, or we feel like love has been
Right.
lost, or people don't understand us, which is where the risk comes in. So when our mind creates a catch-22 like that, where it's like, I want that, but I risk losing love if I ask. But in not asking, I still feel like I'm not getting that
Right.
love. To me, that's always a tell of the subconscious when it threatens us with something we're
Uh-huh.
already experiencing.
Right.
So that would be the opening. That would be the opportunity to be like, wait a minute. I see the game that's being played here, which is where the risk comes in. To lean in and go, okay, I get what I'm scared of, and I'm still going to have the courage to ask, because really, truly, the worst that's going to happen is I'll feel like I didn't get my needs met, which I already don't feel. Or I'll feel like I lost love, or I'm not getting the love I want, which I'm already feeling. So the real risk to me is actually on the other side of the equation, is like, can I risk having my needs met? Will I risk being loved? Am I available to risk having my narrative about myself and my worth change by asking for what I want and having someone gladly give it to me and more?
Yeah, I think the other prize behind door number 2, which is being vulnerable and asking. So the first prize is the possibility of, you know, an astounding, shocking amount more of your needs being met just by opening more and being more vulnerable. The second thing, if you keep going down that particular rabbit hole, is you realize more deeply, more viscerally, more experientially what love actually is, and you come into the revelation that you cannot lose love, right? And so in that scenario, you put yourself in the same scenario where someone says no, for example, and maybe at one point in time your whole system would have collapsed and you would have going through this whole experience of recovery, and then the miracle happens and you're like, wait a minute, I'm in the exact same scenario that I would have collapsed in before and had 2 weeks recovery, and this is a miracle. I'm not affected by it at all because I'm in the truth that love is a constant and that this has no meaning and has no association to my self-worth whatsoever. And then you're like, holy shit, I've completely transformed. And if you've been deep enough on the other side of it, which most of us have, and maybe one might still be there, miracle is a very appropriate word, because it's almost like you cannot conceive of someone quote unquote rejecting you or saying no and not feeling rejected and still and feeling joyful and being undisturbed and not affected at all. Ultimately, one will come to that revelation if they keep leaning into vulnerability, and that's why I feel like hidden in a way deep within our vulnerability is an invincibility that we actually crave. It's baked into our desire. If you go all the way down the rabbit hole with our desire, we want to know thyself. We want to know the truth. And so that is something I know that exists down that rabbit hole of keep leaning into dying and being reborn. Dying would just be the death of the belief and the experience that you're going through emotionally, energetically. I'm dying, I'm feeling rejected, and then more truth comes in, more love. I'm dying, and less and less, and then eventually you're like, I'm just worthy. This, what people say yes or no to, has nothing to do. And to me, that's your soul's goal. And to me, that therefore is a worthy pursuit.
Yes.
It's like shoot for the stars and you get the moon. You get all the relative desires within that one big desire. And for me personally, I'm also just recounting my own evolution and how I opened up more to asking and to vulnerability and just kept going. That has been, and so it was like a revelation to me. It was like a miracle to me that I'm like, oh wow, like I've completely changed. This is not affecting me. And not only is it not affecting me, I'm dwelling in the truth of who and what I am, and this is better than anything I could have ever imagined.
Yeah, getting to that place, that level of revelation, dwelling in the truth of who you truly are, is a far greater prize or gift than the initial hit of love or affirmation
Right.
that we were looking for in the first place.
So you could argue, to use your words, you could say you risk not only losing the possibility of receiving what you want, you risk not only secondly losing the possibility of offering someone a gift of giving to you, but then third, you lose the holy grail of realization of who and what you are. If we stay contained within ourselves, isolated within ourselves, in our own hearts in that way. And so basically the sales pitch here is that the pain, the perceived pain, if you're perceiving pain on either end, there's massive upside potential in going through the pain of softening, of opening, of leaning in, versus the perceived versus going in the other direction and like creating a little illusion of safety and like a little bit of relief. Like what we perceive the payoff to be in not being vulnerable is minuscule and it's predictable.
It's minuscule, it's predictable, and it's fragile as fuck. It will collapse eventually because it's not real. It's safety. Right. It's a battening down of the hatches. And I'm not judging anyone for having that experience. I've certainly had it many, many times. but it's fragile and it will break and we will have to come out of it eventually.
Right.
What's so hard to see, but is the one promise, really, is that if we have the courage to go and go behind door number 1, 2, and 3, success, if you want to call it that, revelation, awareness, it's guaranteed as long as we keep going. In hiding and withholding the vulnerability, there is no guarantee of success. There's a guarantee of being cracked open eventually and experiencing more pain. I would say that is at a soul contract level written.
Right.
And there is a guarantee if we do keep going and leaning in, we will ultimately find what it is we want, which is not like love and affirmation. It's that source of love is within ourselves, and it's actually unshakable and immutable. We never lose it.
Amen. Can we slide over a little bit so I can get out? I'm just in the trees, like shading me quite a bit.
Just throwing shade.
Trees throwing shade. Yeah, I would say that for me, just one example of this in my life as if I look at it as this soul dojo where I keep expanding deeper into vulnerability, deeper into love and into truth, is with my voice in the world. And I just, see how this translates in terms of the giving of your gifts, right? And being somebody who is publicly sharing on social media, I'm on stages, I'm on podcasts, and my voice in the world, one of the big catalysts for me deepening in this vulnerability was being visible in the world. And then there's levels of visibility, and then there's just been so many things. And something came to me, or I actually heard it phrased this way years ago, and I really resonated with this. And it was a question. And the question is, what judgment am I not willing to receive that if I were willing to receive it would liberate me? Clarification, the word by receive, it doesn't mean internalize or buy into or believe to be true, but receive just means like to release all of my defenses against that thing being said. It's the one Facebook comment, it's the one guy that pops up on your thread. It's like, yeah, but what about this? Yeah. Right. And this is it's so powerful because it's the willingness to receive it. It's the willingness to release the defenses, which is not having compassion for the intensity or how it might feel or the fear that might be there. It's just the willingness. So that hit me as a very powerful question. It's like, yeah, what is that one comment? What is that one thing that somebody could say and it's like a detonator that it just explodes your whole self-worth inside you and you're trying to recover? Because the willingness, the courage, the will to release, I'm willing to release my defenses against that, liberates your energy. And even if it doesn't initially, you feel like you could even still be afraid, but that to me hit me and I was like, oh, that's my soul's goals. And so even though the one who's like, this hurts, might be like, oh, I don't want that. It's like, yeah, but what do my soul, my true self, what do I want? And I've learned to align my soul's goals with my goals to the point where they are usually just the same thing. Do you know what I mean? And so I went after that practically by initially just doing live streams. I was like, I'm just going to go where I can't edit, I can't, and I'm like, and that was my prescription from my own soul and my gradient of expansion, and that's unique to everyone. But it's such a powerful question. It's such a powerful inquiry. It's like to be intimate with that one thing, that one voice, because it could feel like a million people are yelling it at you. It's just like one thing.
It's an incredible question, and even if you don't maybe know the answer immediately intellectually, you do know the answer because if you really pressed yourself, you would know that one action or activity that you're most afraid to do. So I had a similar growth edge with that and conquered it by performing live, doing live streams, getting up on stage, like all the shit where I could not edit, I could not take it back, I couldn't use my intellect to make sure I didn't fuck something up, which is what I always wanted to do. So whether or not you know the answer, you will find the answer in the activity you are would be most scared to go do and are probably most called to do.
Yeah, it's like I often say, all fear is a fear of feeling. This is another way to engage with this honest, compassionate inquiry is locate the actual feeling. Like if you trace down any fear, if you say, I'm afraid of losing my money, I'm afraid of the business not working, I'm afraid of rejection, you can boil it down to a singular vibration of feeling that you don't want to permeate. It feels like you're dying if you're going to feel that one thing. And that one thing is the thing that can liberate you, and it is a massive key to your success. A massive key. And it like I said, it might seem like, oh no, it really is the money. It's like, okay, well, just keep peeling back the layers. Okay, if you lose your money, then then it'll be hard to pay my bills. Then, and it often comes down to one moment of like, oh, then I'll be feeling shame in the presence of my family, or it's your projection that you would be shamed by someone, and it's that moment of like you're standing before your family, the person, your kids, your employees, the vision didn't work, and it's that moment where you're imagining slash projecting this immense feeling of unbearable shame filling you up.
Yeah.
And that's the actual fear, though.
Yeah. Nothing to do with the outer circumstances. Ultimately, it's what you project or believe those circumstances will trigger in you. And I would say it is always, I will say this, it is always some flavor of shame or guilt or a mixture of the two about who you truly are or what you have done. And in my experience, in myself and all the people I've coached, that's the feeling. One of those two things that we're trying to avoid all the time. It makes me think of this quote from Lao Tzu where he said that the greatest defense is nakedness and vulnerability.
Mm.
Where if you unwrap, take all that armor off, and there is nothing protected, there is nothing to even defend, which is sort of what you're saying. It's like if you're willing to go have that experience that you've been avoiding, there's no longer anything you're running from. There's nothing to hide from.
Yeah, I'll say the same thing in a couple more ways. It's like there's one phrase that says, in your defenselessness, your safety lies. And that is what I was implying, is that if you are willing to receive this one thing that you think is going to kill you, then there's nothing, then you've liberated yourself. Or what I said was hidden inside of your vulnerability. If you go all the way down the rabbit hole, there's an invincibility. That invincibility is the knowingness of your worth. It is the knowingness of your unity with God. That's more stable than anything, and there's an invincibility there. But also said in the not the words of the great Slim Shady, but in Eminem and 8 Mile, I call this the 8 Mile method. He's doing that battle rap scene. He goes up again. He's building his way up to the top battle rapper, and he choked on stage earlier in the movie, and he finally gets up there. He's battling the top dog, and they flip the coin. M goes first, and he grabs the mic and basically says all of these things, these horrible things about him, about his relationship with his girl, about all of these things that this guy could use against him. He just spoke himself. He's like, yes, my best friend did cheat on me. My mom was addicted to crack. Da 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 da. And then he says, tell these people something they don't know about me. Hands the mic, and to me, that is such a profound
Right.
experience of liberating yourself from ultimately from your own illusion of your unworthiness.
That's so beautiful, man. I love that you brought that scene up. And yeah, I'm not necessarily recommending you go do this, but were you to get on a video or on a platform and be, here's all the shit I'm insecure about that I am mortified to imagine the world knowing about me. Again, I'm not suggesting you do that, but if you were to do it, would you get some kickback? Yeah, maybe, but ultimately, like, it would probably your experience would end up with you receiving more love because you're not walking around like this. You're walking around with an open heart. Some people won't like that. I'm not a betting man, but if I were, I would bet that many more people will love you even more. They'll see your beautiful heart even more because it's not hidden anymore. And as cliched as what I'm about to say is, we're the ones who are judging ourselves most harshly. The shit we don't want other people to see, even if they saw it, it's a passing thought, man. People are too are too consumed
Too
with
consumed with
what's
their own.
going on, but that they want to hide. So even if it were exposed, it means so much less to anyone who's not us than it does to ourselves. Any closing words, Maestro?
I'm just reminded of these words that came from my soul or from somewhere years ago that were such a deep imprint of what self-love really means, like in the deepest way. And it was, I would rather betray the world than betray my own heart. I would rather betray the world than betray my own soul. And by betray, I don't mean in a negative sense. It means I would rather be perceived as if I'm some way that I'm not than try to act in such a way that manages someone's perception of me so that I don't ruffle any feathers. I'd rather feathers get ruffled by me living in my truth and being in my honor and being in the innocence of who and what I am than leave that and abandon myself in the name of love that can't happen when I'm disconnected, people pleasing. Anyway.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen. Um, I'll just add to that something very small, which is that love that we're trying to get through hiding and ultimately being an imposter in our own lives and in betrayal of who we truly are in our own lives. The love available to all of us when we have the courage to let go and to open up even 1% more. You don't have to rip the door off the jams, even 1% more. There's so much love available, and the quality of that love trumps what we're calling love that we're trying to get by hiding and staying safe. So
Amen.
have that courage. It pays off in dividends. Love y'all.